Everybody else ready? Okay. Hi, good afternoon. This beautiful rainy afternoon. And I'm Kimberly Tumlin, and I actually wanted to start with a prayer. And my dearest friend, I won't say old, we've known each other for a while. Trish, would you mind leading us in a prayer to start?
Sure. We pray with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for being with us during this conference. Thank you for giving us the sign of your presence last night with the double rainbow. Thank you also for the rain you sent, because we know that in rain, just like in trials, there is growth. There is a closeness that comes as we face those trials together. We thank you especially for your calling of all these wonderful people who are faithful servants to ministries that you have called them to start. And we're so grateful to be surrounded by others with the same heart for you. Thank you for everyone who is willing to share their talents and all that they've learned so that we can all grow together. So we just ask you, Lord, to bless us as we go forward, to keep us safe as we continue here and as we go home. And Lord, just fill our hearts with love for each other, for our participants, and all those involved in every ministry here. We lift every one of them up. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you so much for coming today. And as I started to say, I'm Dr. Kimberly Tumlin with the University of Kentucky. Please call me Kimberly. And I have finally, after many, many years, been blessed to be able to do something that I am so excited and called to do, and that is really facilitating research for transformation and care systems. Now that's kind of a fancy way of saying I'm trying to help people who are helping people ensure that health outcomes are actually measured. Okay? So a little bit of background. We don't all take direct routes where we're going. So I actually have more than 25 years of academic and industry experience in human food and animal health systems. So I am animal science trained. I've managed my own breeding horse farm of paints and quarter horses, raised foals, I've trained horses, and I've been a lifelong rider as well. In terms of my career, I've been trained in basic immunology and physiology. So understanding what is actually going on in the body when we have external forces that occur on the body. But what I really like to do and what is really fun is community engagement. And what that means is that I get out into the community and listen and work with you all on how do we actually do research. So I do what's called functional outcomes research. And this is primarily in populations that have trauma. And that does include abuse, neglect, and witness to violence. So that's one area. The other area would be a physical trauma, so traumatic brain injury. Okay? We would argue that they go together as well. But when we talk about research, they're often separated into different buckets. So we're going to talk today a lot about kind of buckets. So I do asset-based resilience, which just means that instead of looking at the deficit, so instead of just looking at an injury or looking at the neglect and abuse, I want to look at what are those things that make you resilient in spite of all of those challenges. So how do you get through some really traumatic events? How do you get through natural disasters, abuse, neglect? How do you get through that? We really are resilient. We are. Think about the horses. The horses are really resilient when they have a lot of challenges that they face. So I want to study what are those factors that we can put our finger on that make us resilient? And can we build those better using horses and ministry. So, and then the other thing I do is injury and work populations. We're not going to talk about that today. And that is through the Equestrian Athlete Initiative. If you're ever in Lexington, Kentucky, look me up. I'll take you on a really cool tour of a lab with a riding simulator, take you to the dressage simulator as well. Field trip, yeah. Come on out to Kentucky, we'll do that stuff. And also if you're out there, we'll enroll you in a study as well. But what we're here to talk about today is the Equine Assisted Collaborative for Health. So before you guys go, you can all get one of these cards with our QR code. And I do need to preface this with, I always bring something to give out. I flew, so I didn't get to bring the really fun cups and things I normally bring, so I just couldn't figure out how to bring another giant bag, duffel bag of that. So if we're ever in a situation where I can drive somewhere, just know if I'm presenting, you get lots of fun stuff. Okay? You get fun stuff today, just not as fun as a cup. So when we talk about assessment, most of the time we're talking about program level assessment. And when we do program level assessment, we're doing systematic analysis of what's going on and how you're delivering your curriculum. So usually you're doing a needs assessment. Who needs to be served in your area? How many horses do you have? How are you going to do it? It's very logistical, right? It's the ins and outs of running a program, designing out goals for that program. And then what is the status of the program? And that's usually when you're measuring what the goals are, you're achieving those goals in program assessment, you're looking at what that status would be. Person-centered, now I need to ask this, who has heard of person-centered assessment before? Okay, a few of you, good. Does anyone want to tell me an example of a person-centered assessment before we go into talking about it? I can't see it. Mary, is that? Missy.
I'm a speech pathologist by trade, so
perfect.
We do, and I work with swallowing patients, so if I'm doing treatment, it's like, how difficult is it to eat, swallow before, and now how difficult is it for you to eat and swallow after you've done our treatment?
Okay, fantastic. You get a prize. All right, and we'll talk about what this is here in a minute. All right, good example. Does anyone else have an example of person-centered?
So
Elizabeth?
I came here and worked with senior equine. I worked with senior adults, and they had person-centered care there. So it wasn't just about like everybody getting the same food, but getting food that food or entertainment or social emotional, just everything that was centered around an individual, not just like a one size fits all.
Okay, fantastic. The two examples that were provided, one being a swallow clinic of essentially, or swallow therapy, essentially, can you swallow before and after, or what's the quality of that ability? And the second example of looking at perhaps an elder care situation of what does the diet need to consist of, what does the social aspects need to consist of. All right, excellent, excellent examples. What's important about person-centered care is that we're building this with the participant or client as the focus. So program-centric, we're up here in the drone. If you guys came to the pre-conference, we're talking about the drone above the round pen trying to look at the big picture. That's your program-centric. Person-centric is where we want to actually know what that experience is that that person is having in that program. So it's not even what is the horse doing, but what is the entire experience going on. So today's a great day. It's holistic. We talked about the rain. We know that rain is important, right? And it changes the experience that every person's going to have today at this clinic for different reasons. And so some people are going to have a worse time than they would have had if it was bright and sunny. And others are happy that it's a little cool and windy, right? Because you thrive under a different situation. And so when we talk about person-centered, we need to have assessments that are going to pick up those nuances because every person is different. Your experience is going to be different. The biggest word, if you can remember, is functional. So functional outcomes. So, the example, swallowing. In order to eat without a feeding tube, you have to be able to swallow. It's a pretty functional, basic functional outcome, right? You can still get nutrition in other ways, but you're not going to have the same experience as if you can swallow something, right? If you're in elder care, you need specific nutrition for your body. That's a functional, and you guys are probably going, well, how does swallowing and nutrition matter if I'm doing equine assisted? Because you want to know what's going on with that person when they leave, I would hope, right? You want to know that what you're doing in this time period stays with them. Woo, I'm getting chills. Stays with them when they go throughout the rest of their life. And how can you impact that person through health outcomes that sustain, right? Especially those of you that work with kids and work in trauma. We know that adverse childhood experiences stay with you. You have worse outcomes as an adult if you are not dealing with those traumatic experiences. And so the idea we need to measure and we need to figure out is if we intervene at specific points in that child's life, do we reduce those propensities for obesity and substance use as an adult? And I'm going to tell you that the research isn't there yet. We don't know. That's what you guys are going to help us with. All right, so some examples. Thank you for our two examples that we had. So here's some other examples. Engagement is an important program level tool. And I will provide these slides as well. So these aren't, you guys can still take notes. But I will definitely provide these. So frequency and quality of engagement. So again, those of you that work with specialized populations, how frequently are they engaging? So if you're working in autism, are you able to get an engagement 10 times, right? You're counting a frequency. Quality is getting into, okay, they're engaging with the horse and the people, right? You start to talk about that entire system. And we really focus on counts here. So attendance, the number of participants. So a lot of times you'll see, and maybe you guys haven't, have you looked at websites of other programs that are out there? And it's always these nice tickers, if you've got, we've served 300 youth, and we have 10 horses, and 5 of those horses have been rescued. And it's numbers, it's counts, okay? They are important to your program. They are important to potential donors because they want to know the level of donation that they want to make. The hours that you spend with people, again, they are also important counts. So I want to make sure you go home with, yes, program level assessment's important, but it measures something different than person-centered. So multiple perspectives can come in our program. So you can have clients, staff, volunteers. What other ones could we think of? What other perspectives might contribute to your program?
Family.
Absolutely. Family.
Counselors, maybe.
Counselors, school guidance counselors. Okay, so they are still important to your program because you might be working with a school program where you have truancies or you have detentions, right? Again, counts. Important, but just counts. Focus. So it's the big picture, and it's usually funding driven, right? Usually it's based on some funder says, I want to know how many of this, how many of that. All right, person-centered examples. So it's about the experience in the care. That's one form of person-centered. It does include engagement, but what does this really look like? So again, we're not going to count how many times they're engaged, but I'm going to go back to our autism, a person with autism example. Is it engagement visually? Is it engagement somatically? Is it engagement with verbalizing? And then what is the quality of that verbalization, right? We've heard a lot, or maybe depends on what. It's so fun with all these different sessions, right? But when we were talking about the zone of, now I can't remember what you called it, the window of tolerance.
Yeah.
Okay, the window of tolerance is something like, it's got the 4 things and I can visualize. You want me to draw it for you? I'm so visual, I could draw it. And we did the exercise out there and we moved the things. Okay, so the window of tolerance. So in that session, I'm so glad that you're here. Because in that session, one of the things that really rung home with me is, you talk about a really cool functional outcome where you could actually measure that exercise of where those pool noodles are, where the boundaries are. How does that change for that person over time? So now we have a number that's representing a window of tolerance, okay, to actually explain where their comfort level could be. So in other words, are they able to interact closer with the horse or with a group, or is it that they have such a dysregulation that they have to be away from the entire group? Okay, you could actually put that. Not the best measure, but we'll go there. Health-related, quality of life, burden of illness, and flourishing. Ooh, what's flourishing? How do you measure flourishing? It's okay, Harvard's done this, so. Well, I have a tool recently. I love it. Everyone's like looking at me, I don't know. So there is a human flourishing tool that does exist, that is free to use. I have a link to it, so you can look at that if that's something you're interested in implementing that's been validated. But flourishing is taking all of these aspects of life. So it does include financial, it does include relationships. You're going to see this common theme in multiple tools when we're talking about person-centered. It's the social, the emotional, the physical aspects, okay? The psychosocial. So what's really important about person-centered assessments is that we are trying to get individuals to have activation in their own healthcare. So are they actually taking responsibility for their experience? And so let me back up. Have any of you observed this when you're working with participants? Would someone share briefly what that would look like? And I'll have to repeat it.
What was that?
I'll have to repeat it so the recording can hear, but go ahead.
I mean, particularly with the discipleship of one of our participants, watching her come up through the program, she's now actually leading sessions individually, but she's recognized in leading sessions that there are areas that she still needs to address in her own life when it comes to anxiety and her ability to lead and wanting to people please and make sure everything's right and control. And she actually, as a 16-year-old, was able to identify that and go, help me figure this out.
Yep.
Which was a really big deal because years before, she wasn't really old enough to recognize that. But
Yeah.
at 16, to recognize that, own it, and want to do something about it.
That's incredible. So briefly for our recording, a 16-year-old that is leading sessions but has recognized the fact that their own anxiety and other limitations need to be addressed as they're working through actually leading this type of activity, right? And so for that kind of self-awareness and to be interested in, it's not even taking responsibility, it's just an understanding of where you are. It's that presence that we were hearing about earlier, that being in the moment right now. And then the other key thing here is that the client or participant is actually navigating this experience. So they're part of the discussion when it comes to what needs to be worked upon. So it's not just a psychometric approach of, I'm going to ask you a question and I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to assign you a specific diagnosis and now you're going to get treatment just for that diagnosis. It's a conversation of, okay, you've been diagnosed with anxiety. What are the ways that this impacts your life? And what are those other functional outcomes where we can actually make impact so that you're able to have a successful and fruitful adulthood. Not, we have to reduce your anxiety down to here. Okay? Because for some people, back to our window of tolerance, it may shift all the time, right? It doesn't mean that that diagnosis goes away. Okay? Maybe it does. But for someone that's diagnosed with autism, it's unrealistic to expect that the autism is just going to go away, right? It's diagnosed, it's there. So how do we shift into functionality over time so that these individuals are having a fruitful, successful life? So it's inclusive. So who is part of the care? We're not just talking about the person. We're talking about the family, the community, and the school. When I say community, it can be a school community, it can be a church community, it can be their friend community, it can be the horse community. Okay, so think about who needs the support and who's part of that care. So, when we're talking about transforming care systems, the first thing we have to do is locate those who are in need. And when we do that, so when you're thinking about this from how do we shift into person-centered assessment, we have to find out who those people are. So some of you already know that, right? You already are well established, you're doing this, you know who that is. Some of you are like, I just need to get started. I don't know who that is. I need to figure that out. You may need to do a needs assessment for your program before you can get into the person-centered assessment of the who, right? So they do go hand in hand. So you need to communicate the information about those people. What do they look like? Kids, adults? Are you working with able-bodied participants? Are you working with those with neurodivergent conditions? Are you working with those that are in spiritual crisis? Are you working with those who are in substance use? Are you working with those that can't swallow and have other physical conditions? What is it? So communicate the information about that. And then in our transformation, so we're going to get into why transformation is so important here. We're shifting this concept of impact away from productivity. Treated 500 participants this year. Yes, we're productive. We're a manufacturing machine. We're knocking them out and kicking them out the door, okay? Look at all these people we push towards God. Oops. That's not necessarily impact, right? That's not moving in the way that we're called to move. So we want to shift impact away from productivity and incentivize those that are most challenging. Most of the time your funding isn't going to track with those that are most challenging, and here's why. Because they take longer. And you don't know how many times it's going. So if you have somebody that has severe functional disabilities, okay, they're never going to be on the same assessment scale as someone who comes in with no functional disability, ever. But does that mean that they don't improve? Does that mean that they don't have impact? I mean, that you don't have impact? Because when we look at it in the traditional sense, where we're trying to say, well, let's bring this person up here, that's not what we're really trying to do with health impact. It's not health equity either. It's what we really want to get into is where is this person? And maybe they can go to the bathroom on their own as an adult. How incredible would that be that we, with our horses, could make that change and give them hope, right? That would be amazing. So when we're talking, when I talk about assessment, in particular, and the model that we're going to talk about, it's moving us out of this concept that research has to be this positive outcome that everyone reaches this specific plateau, right? And then early on, and I hesitated to actually write this out because I know everybody wants to read it first, you know. But my question is, don't you think it's those first foundational times when you bring someone into your environment that you have the most opportunity to make change? Because you're learning each other, you're starting to create this relationship. And so you start to discover where are those pieces that you need to address. So it's the early on is really more valuable. So it's almost that thought of, how does the introduction go? I didn't like the introduction to this talk, I'm out. I'm the first person to do that at large research conferences. If I walk in and I can't read the slide, or that first slide doesn't have a picture on it, or I look around the room and everybody's just kind of, on their phone, not paying attention, and I'm like, I liked the topic, but I'm out. Why? Because you didn't draw me in. So it's really important in your programs when you're thinking about assessment that your first, and I'm going to bring this up, your discovery process doesn't push people away, okay? And you maximize the entire system. So I'm going to get into this of how we do this and why this is important. All right. Does anyone need paper or an iPad? You want a free pad of paper?
I'll take it for you.
All right. I won't. Okay. I was going to throw it. I had that. I distinctly got the throw it in the back of the room. And then I thought, I failed miserably at any kind of eye-hand coordination sports. And I thought perhaps I might take out somebody's eye. And then people would leave. And I would have to talk to myself. So. But they would remember it. They would remember it. They would remember that. And that whole thing went through my head when I was running around the corner with my. And then I thought I might fall down, and that would not be good either. So, okay, jot a note on your paper of what's important in your program. And if you don't have a program, just think about a hypothetical one that you would think is important. Briefly, what do you measure, if you do? And then, are these program-centric or person-centric or both? And we are going to just take about 30 seconds. All right, does everybody have everything written down? Of course not. I didn't give you guys the 1-minute exam that I always used to teach with. All right, take out a piece of paper, write down in 1 minute what we just learned. Sometimes people had a blank paper, sometimes people had paragraphs. It's amazing. All right, we will move on. Do you need to write down the questions? Everyone's got the questions. Okay, perfect. All right, you're not supposed to be able to read this, okay? It's intentionally tiny because systems mapping. Anyone done systems mapping in their life? Yeah, a few of you. Okay, all a system. Some of you are like, no, never heard of this. Okay, what's really good about a systems map, and I thought about doing this exercise, and then I thought, we need way more time to do this exercise than what I have today. And we could do that in the future, but a systems map is really a way to look at a complex system, which equine assisted programs are a complex system. We have a horse, We have a person, we have volunteers, we have a facilitator or a counselor, we have the outdoor environment, we have the person's internal conditions, internal environment, we have the family, right? So you can start to see all these different parts. And then each of these parts have connections. And so what it does is it takes this complexity and puts it in a very visual form. So it allows you to think about your entire system and figure out where these interrelational parts are. Now, why is this important to assessment? Well, it tells you what's really important in your program. So we can do a systems map for your program, and then you can say, oh, you know what's really important to us is how they're communicating with the horse. Okay, great, that's what we assess. So it may not just be the goal of the program, but it's the how you're getting there. It's that experience again. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. On your free pads of paper, you're going to see this thing called TCOM. And TCOM is important. I work for the Center for Innovation in Population Health. If you're so excited to go to their website, there's a QR code up there. This was established in 2019 at the University of Kentucky. So I wanted you to know it's not that it's a new concept. The tools have been in use since the 90s. But the concept for this center, where we're trying to draw all of this together, came into being in 2019. And the purpose is to support innovative approaches for improving population health using a TCOM framework. And then you're like, well, great, what does that mean? Okay, well, that's what the next slide is. But you need to know that what we do, what our job is, and what we're here for, is to support workforce development, precision analytics and reporting, and safe systems, all of which are important to what you do. Okay? So we can help you in a number of ways. So what's TCOM? TCOM, each letter obviously stands for something because we all like to make these fun acronyms. And the first one is transformational. So the whole intent of this framework is that personal change is why we're doing an intervention. It's why we work. It's why we're called to do what we're doing. We want transformation. No one wants to have the same kid over every time for the rest of their life, right? You would like to see them transform and be able to be a successful adult. Collaborative, it's not just about one person. It's about us working together. It is about this concept of community. It's about how we can, all of our human approaches are important to the perspective. Outcomes, an outcome is what we're measuring, that we're making decisions that are actually going to be an impact measurement. Ooh, use that word twice. All right, so we're really trying to assess what the impact is. And we do that through functionality. So remember our two examples that our audience gave earlier were about ability to swallow, which is, that's such a great, I'm going to use that example from now on. I really am, and it's quite relevant to the journey I've been on this summer, not personally, but, and so thank you for that. And then also for having social support, food, and emotional support for our elder care as well. Also, holistic, functional. Management. Okay, information is used in all aspects of planning the program and system operations. This is the other piece that is often missing. You guys are doing great work, but how do you manage all this stuff? Like, you're good with the horses, or you're good at fundraising, or you're good at the horses. I always just come back to, like, everybody comes into this because they're really good with the horses, or they're good at counseling. So where do we want, this is part of the framework, accessibility to people, data, and programs. This is where we're starting right now. And I'm gonna, our each that we're doing is really this, accessibility to people, data, and programs. Engagement and assessment process, that's the next step that we're looking for. Planning and delivery is back onto you. when we get the first 2 steps done, we step up to monitoring, adapting. So we're doing a continuous improvement process, those of you that have done assessment. We look at the entire care system, so it's not just about equine assisted. Uh-oh. Oh, what do you mean it's not just about equine assisted? Right, guess what? You don't live in a vacuum. The people that come to you don't live in a vacuum. They don't, I mean, I know, I grew up in a barn too. But we don't live in a vacuum. You have to go back into that home that may or may not be supportive. You may have changes in that home. You may not have a stable place to live, some of your kids, okay? So you want to make sure that you're looking at what's going on in the functional life of those individuals around the people that you're trying to help. And then we finally transition. The sun comes out, the rainbow happens, okay? We transition. That's the idea. So what is this? And I'm going to go to the website. So this QR code that is on here, you guys can pass some of these around, is first a website, and this is to give you more information about what we do and how we do. This is, Logan, sorry, I was having a name blank. This is Logan. He actually is a 5-year-old twin, and his parents were like, we don't know what's wrong with this twin. And it took them a while to finally get him diagnosed with autism, and they didn't know how to raise him or discipline him, and he's nonverbal, and what do we do? And he got just started in equine assisted in February. He's talking from February. He goes and puts his helmet on. He doesn't get dressed at home, but he'll go put his helmet on. Okay, we know this is impactful, but when you talk to the parents, that also is impacting their lives positively too. Okay, those are the things that we need to start capturing. So what you can do is you join each today, and it's really hard to, there we go. Click on this, and you take this lovely little survey, is all. It gets sent to me, and then you get to be a part of this safe space where we can share ideas, talk about research. So what I do, and I post on here, you can post any articles that you have found, or if you want me to help you interpret a research article, that is something that I can help with. Videos. So let me scroll down here. Oops. Okay, so I will go back to that. I'm going to have to be loud. So I organized this in the context of a barn. So we can always add stalls onto our barn, because this costs nothing to add stalls. So if we want this to be a 100-stall barn, it is up to the community, you guys. I am just here to help facilitate this. But in this stall, which I put as practitioners, so I was thinking, okay, these are things that those of you that are actually providing the service would want to have. And so one of the things, I have a link here right now, I don't know if you guys know this, there's actually an economic impact survey going on right now for the American Horse Council. I have not taken the survey, so I don't know the details of it, so I'm not endorsing these specific things, I just provide you the links. But there's a link here. I say, take a moment to update this. The reason this is important, because they provide me database information so I can reach you. You guys are hard to find. Trish and I have been working for 3 years trying to find all of you specifically that are doing ministry and biblically based equine assisted programs. It is very difficult. But if you join each, then we know who we all are. We can communicate. We can create a stall that's specifically ministry-based programming. Here's the other reason this is important. There are a lot of secular programs that may be interested and know nothing about you guys. I go to conferences for all these different events, and you guys don't talk to each other. Don't, because you're so focused, which is good, on doing good work, but it's important because you might be able to mentor individuals that are in other equine assisted programming that are just looking for something more. Or the reverse side, there's somebody that has really good horsemanship skills that you're like, I really want to incorporate more horsemanship, but I need to learn from someone else, okay? So there's a lot. I would not be going out in the rain right now, I just wait. Yay! Okay, so I have an arena too, besides the stalls. And I post research in here. I'm really gonna have to start using my outside voice. Okay, in the back in here, sorry on video if I'm too loud. So I understand you guys aren't nerdy like I am and like to read these research articles. Okay, some of you do. Good, because I will post a research article. I will also, if there are articles that I've done, for instance, this one is a link to a short 5-minute video. We're not going to play this. We don't. Whoa up there, Betty. No thanks, everybody. Okay. So one of the things that, just relax. Okay. I said relax. Well, I'm talking to myself now. So we do these 5-minute videos about the research. So if you like to watch a video, it's 5 minutes of this is what the research says. I will work to get more researchers to do these. So these are visual, they're very easy to follow. The other thing that we do, okay, I don't have to yell so much now. I'm going to go back to my slides. Is we have a blog that's posted. Oh, I can tap normally. We have a blog that is posted on the TCOM site. Oh, look at that. There's my research brief there too. And you can scroll down to this. This link will take you, oh my gosh, my blog has gotten buried. Here it is. And so these come out fairly frequently, at least once a month. We're going to get to probably twice a month. And there'll be blogs. If you're interested in writing a blog about something you're doing, short 400 words, contact me. I actually have a form you can fill out. Okay? Let me know. The other thing that we're doing, because this is part of getting the word out, get back out of our barn here, is our Strides podcast. And I know that Trish has generously been talking about this because no one wants to hear me talk every month, right? But I will interview people to do a podcast because when I've talked to other equine assisted programs, they're like, look, I don't have time to watch your videos or read your papers. I'm not going to do that. And they said, we want to do a podcast. I was like, what's that noise? It's my timer. And so I need participants to interview for our podcast. Now, you have to have access to be able to do Zoom. You have to have decent internet, but you don't have to come to Kentucky. And we will make it all jazzy and fancy and do all the recording and stuff. So you don't have to worry about all of the back end stuff because that's what we can provide the support for. So this is part of the workforce development that we want to do so that we're spreading more of these opportunities for people to know what you're doing, but also maybe you've come across a challenge that you've solved and you think it's creatively solved. Well, I'm not going to know that because I'm not in the arena with you. So you have to tell me, okay, if you want to share that. The other thing is these are reaching out to, we're going to go through these quickly. These are reaching out to all of the individuals that are part of TCOM, which are predominantly child welfare services, and those individuals that are working with foster care youth as well. And they do behavioral and mental health services, and they're starting to ask me, well, how do I get into connecting into a program? Where do I find a program? So one of the projects we're working on right now is a map of the United States of where all these programs are, and I will eventually have them listed by, are you ministry based? Are you equine assisted learning? Are you equine assisted psychotherapy? Are you mounted programs? Do you have trail programs? Are you PTSD? So I'm building a database that we will map. It will be organic, but I'm not gonna know. So if you get an each and you're like, when you see the map, well, I'm not on there. Well, because you have to tell me. You just have to tell me where you are, okay? All right, I wanna get through some of the research. This is just an example of the visualization of the paper, so you don't have to read a whole paper. Like, that's it. You learn the paper. Okay, so what partnerships have we had and what are we actually measuring? So I wanted to give you some examples of data and what we've done on the analytics side so that you know what we're doing to help the community already. And these are each partners. So these are partners that have come to us and said, I want to measure and I have no idea, or we've been measuring and we don't know what to do with all this data. And so that's what we do. So this data set, each of these blocks represents an individual participant. And what we can see, there are two phases. So we have a pink line and we have a little blue line here, all right? And when you get these slides, you'll notice that the vertical lines are different spacing, right? And so these vertical lines are different spacing because we're not taking assessments all at the same time, which means unless you know how to do complex analytical approaches, you can't compare them. And you go, I have all this data and I can't make comparisons. And so we hand it over to our biostatisticians and they say, look, we can get them all on the same axis. And you go, now we look at patterns. Are there patterns either individually, oh, what happened here, right? What happened here? So we help you guys look at a person or a group of people and say, this happens to be a transition between phases in the program, and look how much this person dropped. What are we missing when they transition into a new part of the program? What do we need to do to make that transition better? These become representative for people transitioning out of school systems, into jobs, into adulthood, in marriage and divorce, if, whatever it happens to be, your transition through life. If we're capturing this now, what skills do we need to build to help that, okay? So we scale time and how those scores change, and we're looking at potential program level. Like when we look at it this way, we're looking at what do we need to look at for the program. We can also then look at, here's an example of that person we're talking about is never going to be up as high as the other people. If these black lines are the mean, right, they're never going to be up that high. So is that realistic to say that they're not making change? Well, they're a little more variable. So we can go back and talk about that person and say, what is it? Do they need new mentorship? Do we need to change the program outcomes? I don't know. All right, caregiver feedback. Again, need to dim the lights. But, so there's very few, this is common for parent feedback. It's great. What they're saying is, did they improve? Okay, was there a reduction? Well, we think that they improved. So there's, we had a significant improvement. Everything's significant improvement. Well, is it? Well, a lot of people said some. You see how variable this is? It's all over the place. Some people are like, we don't know. And some people are like, we really didn't see anything. But you're kind of extreme. So we can help you take all of these graphs, all this data. When you just look at the numbers that you're collecting, whatever tool you're using, we can help you interpret that. Okay? So again, this is between steps. What we were actually looking at was the mean. I'm glad this isn't a touch screen. The mean between those steps. All right, person-centered assessment. So my favorite's the CANs. We can talk more about this. There are youth, behavioral, emotional needs, risk behaviors, life functioning, strength, cultural factors, caregiver resources, and needs. Hey, does this sound like we're talking about the entire person? So what's exciting about the CANs is that it is used in multiple states in child welfare services. It's used internationally, and we have a data set of over 2 million children and families that we can actually compare your kids. So if you have 5 kids that have specific demographics in an area, we could case match them against 5 kids that have those specific demographics in an area and look at what their change is in traditional behavioral mental health services and what your change is in equine assisted. So all of a sudden you have some natural experimentation you could do with the CANs. I'm gonna scroll on. So what are we measuring? So the ones that I particularly like equine assisted groups to do are strengths, because remember, I'm doing assets. So I like all of this measured. Now, one of the things I want to point out here is we do have a spiritual or religious line item, but I'm really interested in your feedback on, would you guys be interested in writing new assessment, 3-4 items that would capture more of what you're doing? Because this is basically, do they have some type of religion or spiritual connection? That's it. It's not going in depth. Would you be interested in working with me to develop something that's equine assisted that focuses in on that development? We can do that. We can collectively use that tool to look across programs. So partnership right now, my first CANS data set just came in last week from a secular program, but I'm really excited about this because they are very low functioning individuals, youth, that we have PediaCat scores on. Are any of you familiar with PediaCat? Yeah, if you're not doing therapeutic riding, you probably aren't. But this is the pediatric anyway, it measures daily activities. That's the late day. It'll come to me. The pediatric disability inventory, and it's computerized assessment test. Okay, got it. So it measures daily activities, social, cognitive, mobility, responsibility. The parents take this. What's really cool about this tool, what's really not cool about this tool, is it's like 200 questions. So they're doing it 3 times a year. Parents don't necessarily love doing that, but the really cool thing is that I never thought about, could my kid transfer from a vehicle into a wheelchair? Or can they buckle their belt? They never thought about that. Like, I don't know if my kid can do that, I just do it for them. Well, maybe you should see if they can do it, because that helps them be functional. All right, the one that I saved for last, and I want to make sure we have time to get to. Trish and I also worked together with Liberty University to develop a survey that some of you may have seen and taken and participated in. And what we were doing, this was back into the, we need to find you guys. What are you doing? And one of the things I discovered in research is that everyone's saying that equine assisted works, but no one's ever describing what's going on in the program. I mean, you are, but we're not. And what are the activities that you're actually doing? Like, what does an organization look like? And so part of what I've been trying to do for the past couple of years is just learn. Listen and learn. What are you doing? Like, explain it to me. Not because I'm trying to change it, but because I'm trying to figure out how do we assess this. All right, I've been around horses. I know there's an organic experience that happens. You can't, like, measure that. And I'm not doing biometric measures. So I'm not doing heart rates because I don't feel like it's something you can use. I want something you can use every day. Most people can't have heart rate monitors. Most people don't have the time to put in motion sensors, that sort of thing. So we have a secular group. We had 28 respondents. We have a faith-based group, which we had 65. And from a program level assessment perspective, our non-secular offered therapeutic riding, and our secular offered more in terms of like the majority, offered hippotherapy and occupational, and this was significantly different. Trauma-informed practices were the same, which I thought was really interesting that we're having this similarity. And then community gatherings, retreats, and prayer meetings, I was happy to see that we had, we have a p-value. We did hide, if you guys want to ask about statistics later, I'll explain it to you. But 32 out of our 65 actually are offering community gatherings. I think this is a huge strength of what's going on in our faith-based equine-assisted programming. That's what you capitalize on. We're building community. Is anyone measuring that? Why not? That's easy to measure. You can even count events, okay? And we can figure out how to measure flourishing or community or something along the lines with that. Progress assessment. So when we're talking about what is happening and how you're describing progress in your participants, our discovery interviews are similar. So about 68% in our non-secular and 55% in our secular are doing discovery interviews. I don't say intake because John Lyons, who developed the Center for Innovation in Population Health in Kansas, says intake and exit is a plumbing term. And when we talk about person-centered care, we really don't want to talk about plumbing. So we talk about discovery and transformational experiences, not intakes. So go home and take that language out of your, it's discovery, because we're trying to discover about another. Symptom resolution. Again, no significant difference here, but only 25% and 35% are actually doing symptom resolution. So you're actually looking at reversion of symptoms associated with a specific diagnosis. Number of programs measuring spiritual growth and maturation. I'm not surprised that only one of our non-seculars is measuring this. Good. This is when data tells you something that you expect. We're happy with this. And it is significantly different, even better, that our faith-based programming is doing it, but only 17 out of that 65 are actually measuring it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I must not understand the chart. Isn't the top one the faith-based reverse?
Oh, I did reverse that.
Okay, thank you.
Slide problem.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
This one
and the last one.
Yeah.
I got a flip-flop on the back one too, I think.
Oh, no. I will fix that before I send that out.
I think the last one did that too.
I did. Don't, please always ask me the question. There's a reason I do visuals, because it's much easier than words, and I flip them. Yes, so 17 of these guys. Absolutely, those are reversed. Yep. Okay. They're different, regardless. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, a word cloud, because guess what? We can help you do qualitative analysis too, not just numbers. And so this was what words were coming up, how did they describe the progress assessment, and the bigger the word, if you don't know how to read a word cloud, the bigger the word, the more times that's coming up. So it's really a frequency analysis of times that word is showing up in a number of samples, okay? And so in this case, hope, Christ and Jesus and God and purpose, relationship, and healing are all important progress. So you take these two things together, given that this slides. Think in my dyslexic brain, flip it up, okay? Because it totally made sense when I was working on this. You gotta fix it. So 17 are actually measuring spiritual growth. But when we describe progress, our number one thing is hope, Christ, and Jesus. could develop a tool in the hands that actually puts numbers to this so that we can measure it across all of the buildings. If you want to work, if we want to do this as a group project sometime. Okay. I think we should. I mean, it's if you're interested, we can arrange to start to develop this and then disperse it out and then have updates. What's going on? How is this working? How do we validate it? Right? Because it takes time. But I believe it would be really cool to have it. And the thing is, it could also be used in non-equine system if we design it properly. So then you could use it in your church for your other church programs and look at the difference. Okay. Now, yeah.
Do you have time to just back up a little and explain to them, or you don't have to back the slides, but, how Kansas State's on the streets?
Yes. So
And the story.
So the question is essentially, I haven't covered how CANS has been developed and why it's different. Why is it a person-centered tool? So CANS is based around needs and strengths. So on that chart, where there's domains. So within each domain, there's multiple items. There's a behavioral emotional need, life functioning need, cultural need. All of these include things like conduct, family, social functioning, school attendance, language, rituals, cultural stress, that sort of thing. But then strengths also include family, but it's a strength, not a need, right? Because you can have both. And each of these are scored on either non-actionable as 0 and 1, or actionable 2 and 3. So what its intent is to not talk about it means that you need to do something if it's actionable, okay? And the entire premise of this tool, instead of being a psychometric where I'm asking you a question and you're giving me a response, it's you tell me your story. So in our discovery interview, which you're all doing, you are learning the story of the people. Okay? You don't have to have a score on each of these categories. You score what they tell you. And if it's actionable, let's say they don't have any spiritual or religious aspect in their life, it becomes actionable. It's a 2 or a 3. The 2 being, we need to do something. 3 is, we critically need to do something because they might be suicidal. Then, as you do something, if that moves from a 3 down to a 1 or a 0, it's not actionable. They have the strength. You track them over time, their story, which you guys are all collecting, and now you can see their progress. What is that trajectory? So back to that first graph where we have all these lines, okay? Maybe their spiritual growth, they find God, and they move from actionable down to non-actionable, and then they get in with a game. And all of a sudden, it's back actionable. Okay, so what do you do to help that person? That's the next piece, and then it moves down again. So that's how it's built. Does that help answer your question? I was just so excited to get to this, and then I flipped all the numbers. So. Okay, progress assessment outcomes. So these are themes that we qualitatively put together. Again, I believe most of you are already collecting this information. And so what we found, this is just for, I'm making sure my graphic is right. Right. Okay, this is just for those faith-based equine assisted programs. And so what we see are these big boxes: increased positive feelings, improved relational functioning, spiritual development, improved well-being, personal development. And then it was kind of funny because we had this instructor growth that just sort of stuck out here on the side, which I think is still an interesting box that it showed up, but it doesn't relate so much to the other ones. So this is a thematic analysis where we're looking at almost a systems now, okay, of how are these concepts interrelated when you're asking about the story. So there are multiple ways
or, there's negative improvement, but there's, just straight across the board improvement also, like here. So, negative improvement, positive improvement, and no improvement at all.
Let's see. So what is the gas number? So for the
It's not,
report.
it's,
Oh, is gas an acronym?
yes, it is, and I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, okay.
They're called gas goals. We use them in OT a lot, but I forget what gas stands for.
Yeah, I always forget.
It's like zero.
No, we're not like,
It's a gas.
I mean, I was
And
like,
you write them as goals,
oxygen.
so if you write them as goals, and it's very easy to track.
Breathe better. Okay, so gas.
Or you can do it on like a monthly basis or,
Right.
sessionally, quarterly, which is a little bit easier because then you see improvement or you don't see improvement. But otherwise, each session is like, okay, well,
Yeah. Okay, so just make sure we all heard gas on mine, because when I was reading this, because there was no explanation. I'm thinking oxygen or, VO2 max, because we do all kinds of that stuff in exercise physiology. And so, but the explanation is it is a form of tool that an acronym we all need to look up. Do we find it?
Goal attainment scaling.
Goal attainment scaling. Thank you. Okay, now we have that. Please write that down, Trish, because we need that for this survey. So the goal attainment scale is going to have a no improvement, a negative improvement, and a number improvement. What I wanted to point out is if you are already using these but don't have a partner in assessment, in analytics, that's part of what each is. Ultimately, it would be great if we had a data repository for everybody to be able to learn from. Now, I understand some people don't want to share their data, but this is starting to, in the research world, get more important, is that we're actually sharing the data that people can ask questions from. So we can start with whatever you're comfortable with initially. But even if you're using something different, we can help you. And that's what I want to make sure. Ideally, we're all using the same tools so we can make comparisons, but it's okay if you're already well established somewhere, other than we're going to make our faith-based tool based on the things. The other thing in the PowerPoint, I didn't expect you to read this up here, this is when you get it, when I fix these, is that I have kind of a summary list. This is also in each as well as a resource, because these are the kind of things that I like to do, is put together what is the tool, if there's a specific reference, I say C reference, which is on what the focus is of that, physical, quality of life, PTSD, anxiety, behavioral, depression, that sort of thing. And then is it a self-assessment, a caregiver assessment, or a practitioner assessment, and is there a cost to it? Because I'm always looking for free tools for individuals, because I think that's important. And that's the other thing with John's tool, there's, by the way, if you're interested in being training with kids, it's free to you. If you come to me and let me know. You and your staff can be trained for free to use the tool. The tool is free.
And it's easy.
And it is easy training. It's not, in depth, and it would be added to training with other individuals that's online in the nation. There's one in October 17th broke out a couple of facilities in there. And that's important to John because, and he's never advertised or marketed, so I want to make sure you hear that you don't have to market and advertise your approach to things, because he's always believed that good things. He has a background in psychiatry, but also, do you want to talk about the research, his connections? We can't remember the guy's name.
We can't remember the guy's name, but his original colleague that he developed plans with really wanted to measure the impact of faith on health. So John and his colleague were the guys that came up with all that data that you heard about in the 90s about how faith and involvement in church and prayer life and a faith support system improved the quality of life for those people. And so all that data came from John and went on and formed the National Institute of Religious Health or something like that. But anyway, he passed away in the late 90s.
Not John.
Not John, no, but his colleague whose name is escaping both of us. But so John, the leader, of all, senior researcher on all this, has quite a history with faith and public health. So he has quite an interest, and he kind of wants this and the equine and faith-based part to be his last big research project. So this is quite a big deal to get a researcher at this time.
And I've been chosen to be the bridge at the end. John Lyons, but not the horseman. Same name, same spelling. If you look up chemometrics, which the word is right here, and the word hates it, it is a made-up word. But it is actually a word, and he's published on it as a whole book, several books actually.
Sorry for interrupting. I guess my question is kind of remedial. So I think a lot of us have an interest in this.
Yeah.
But like our ministry, everybody here, we're 7 to 8
Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit about the time commitment and like if someone did work at ministry, like what does that look like? How much would it add to the workload and like what would be the talk loud.
I'm gonna say it again. So the question, I gotta talk loud again because you're right. The question is, because a lot of individuals are wearing a lot of hats and maybe you're already feeling pulled in multiple directions, but you're interested in trying to create assessment in your program and or for your individuals, your person-centered care, how much time does it take generally? So I'm going to address that part, and then specifically with the cans, how much time does it take? Okay. So here's my answer. In terms, we are trying to have practice-informed research. So the reason I'm not doing biometrics and skin sensitivities and neurodevelopment, which is all functional MRIs, really cool work in PTSD with horses up in the area, up in the New England area, really cool work. But that's very time intensive for your programs. So first thing, my approach, we have conversation. You tell me, and we can do this as a group in a workshop next year maybe. We have this discussion of what are you doing in your program? And then we figure out where we can either help you analyze things you're already doing. Okay, so most of you have goal sheets. So at a minimum, looking at these word clouds, if you have kids writing down, I learned yesterday of pulling words off of a board. Once they're done with so like the example was motivation. Like the kid went out and pulled motivation and it was a child that wasn't engaged at all. And I said, what word did they choose when they started? We said, we don't do that. And I said, why not? That's a natural experiment. Very simple. Oh, okay. I was like looking around. Where are you? Really simple example of you just have words and then you just look at the change. Okay? That's all you're trying to do. So, part 2. Okay.
Well, I just need to get the computer to set up for the next thing, so you can keep talking if you can just come in and.
Oh, you can do whatever.
I said, I need to, set somebody up on there, and then another group is our horse rescue board is coming in here in a few minutes.
Well, then you just tell me.
Yeah, but you can keep talking to them and answer questions while we just work behind the scenes here. Thank you, I'm sorry for listening.
Don't be sorry.
Important stuff. We hate to cut you off.
Number 2, answer to question number 2, which is how long does the cans take? What kind of time commitment? The online training is an afternoon. It's really kind of at your pace. You have to take the exam, but you have multiple shots to take the exam. You have to achieve an 85%. But you have practice quizzes the whole time while you're going through that. What value does it add? The largest cans, 150 questions. Do I think that that's realistic in equine assistant? No. Okay? The smallest cans is 3. Here's what's beautiful about the tools. You decide, based on what you're doing, which of the items or domains are the most important to you. So if you want 3 questions or when we develop this other tool, which should be 3 or 4, okay, items, then that's what you implement, right? At a minimum, what I like to see are the strengths collected, and the reason for that is because I truly believe this is where we are predominantly making impact, is in the strength building. Not so much in the reduction of symptoms, although I know that regulation, emotional regulation, social regulation is really important. So I don't know that until people collect data. I just have this hunch. But we're going to collect data, but I want to see multiple programs, because then we're going to see, is there something unique about a program that makes something else different? And so I know that different people have theories.
So I'm just curious, so like for Wings of Hope, we have a post survey that we send to parents. Can something like that be sent to you all to analyze? And then second part is, is it possible for us to use maybe what we use already and then add 2 or 3 canned questions to that? So it's like what we're already doing. You know, can you guys analyze what we're doing plus maybe, you know, say, oh, you know, what you're missing is this. Like I would encourage you to maybe ask these other questions.
Yes, so I will, to be short, yes, so I'll repeat for people to hear. So the question was, you guys are welcome to come in and sit down. I know you're about to come in, right? They're not.
I think they're on the
Okay.
So they might be torn.
Oh, that's fine. The question is, what if we already have a survey, we're already doing something? Can you look at that and help with that? The answer is yes. You may not get what you think you're getting out of it. Like you might think that you're measuring impact and you're measuring engagement or participation or attendance. We also know that parents and caregivers are a naturally biased group if they're coming to your program. So most of the time, that's kind of why I put that slide up there, most of the time they're going to say, yeah, significant improvement, this is great. Like, and it may just be because they want their kids somewhere, so they have an hour and a half to themselves. And that, I see that in my facility with severe, children with severe disability. They just want time to themselves. Even if they're sitting in their car reading a book or on their phone, they just want that time. So that is a naturally